Real esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click subscribe and then hit the little bell button so that you can be notified whenever I've uploaded a video or when I'm doing the live Q&A videos. Hello, Thunder Wizards. So, the title of today's video is Believe in Jesus and You Will Die. I think many of you saw this and you just transposed in your mind the word and for or. And so you saw the title as Believe in Jesus or You Will Die. So no, I am saying believe in Jesus and you will die. Christianity it's not so much a religion as it is a dissociative disorder. Now, before you get really angry and you get offended, I want you to be able to understand that if in fact you are a Christian and you believe that you follow the one true God and you follow the one true religion, then you should be secure enough in your belief that if what I say contradicts you, number one, you probably just expect that from a non-believer who's not filled with the Holy Spirit, right? And that if you really are following the true religion, then if you're having a strong emotional reaction to me, it means that you're feeling a little insecure about your beliefs. So I'm just giving you, if you follow the truth, you can relax. You don't have to get upset. And listen to what I have to say. And if it doesn't apply, then move on. Then all you've seen is just another non-believer who's deluded, right? And you can tell yourself that. But, in order to understand what I'm going to be saying here, we really need to employ some critical thinking. Now, let me first tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in a born-again Christian home. I was extremely religious as a child. I went to church all the time, and I was a strong believer. I went through some rebellion in high school. I still was nominatively a Christian, but I, did all kinds of, sinful things, drugs and alcohol and premarital sex and all the things you're not supposed to do. And then when I turned 18, I had a very strong conversion experience back to fundamentalist Christianity, so strongly that I went directly to Bible school, Biola University, and I became a Bible major, and I was studying to become a minister. I was going to become an evangelist, and so I was reading the Bible in Greek. In fact, I was that guy that, when Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses would come to your door to try and, talk you into their religion, and part of their spiel was that they would say, well, in the original Greek, this is what it means. And I was the guy that would say, hang on a sec. And I would go into my bedroom and I would pull out my, you could see the worn, tattered Greek New Testament that I was constantly reading. And I'd say, show me where that is. And of course, they couldn't do that because they didn't actually read the Bible in Greek. They were just spouting what somebody said. And I would say, I'll show you where that is. And I would point to it and I'd say, actually, you've got the wrong translation. It doesn't say that in the Greek. It says this in the Greek. So today we're going to be talking about the Greek verb pisteuo. Pisteuo is the word that Jesus uses multiple times. Not only Jesus, but many New Testament writers use countless times about belief. And I'm going to start with the quote that really sparked me thinking about this recently, which of course is a quote that I had heard countless times before, but for some reason this time, probably because I was tired when I heard it, and also because, I've got a lot of distance now and a lot of different experience where, I'm able to analyze what I'm hearing differently. I just don't take things at face value. Here's the quote. Jesus said to her, let me give you the context. He's talking to Martha, who's, I don't know what relative it was that died, and he was, being buried, and she was very upset. And so he's, superficially, it looks like he's comforting her. And here's what he says. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? This is what he says. He says to her, do you believe this? So the word belief here that he repeats is the verb pisteuo. Pisteuo is oftentimes incorrectly translated as trust. And there's a reason why people do this. The reason why you hear a lot of pastors translate this verb as trust is because that's not really what it means. It means intellectual belief. It means to believe, to choose to believe something, especially choose to believe something that you don't have any evidence for. So you choose what they call faith, for their faith, right? They believe in something that they can't see, that they can't prove. They choose to intellectually believe in it. So Jesus is saying here, and he says multiple times over, that the essence of the Christian religion is an intellectual belief in something that you do not have evidence for. And this is called faith. And that those that really have this, that really intellectually believe in something that they don't have evidence for, these people are seen as righteous. In fact, Jesus goes on to say that, you've seen me and you believe in me, but those that haven't seen me and believe in me, they are the true believers. So he really likes people who intellectually choose to believe in something that they have zero evidence for. He loves that. And this is called faith. And if somebody has a lot of faith in Jesus, this is seen as a good thing. This is not a positive attribute in a critical thinker. The entire Christian religion is based upon a deficit. Let's talk about critical thinking here. Again, if you're a Christian, you're upset with me and you want to argue with me, let's talk about critical thinking. By the way, I learned critical thinking when I was in Biola University. It was the best thing I ever learned in college, and I spent another 8 years in a non-Christian, just a state college. But it was the best course I was ever taught. It was the most valuable thing I ever learned in my entire 8 years of college. I spent 8 years in college. And critical thinking says, first off, number one, that everybody has an emotional agenda. Everybody has emotional attachments to their beliefs. And that everybody reacts emotionally to beliefs, and their emotional reactions have the ability to cloud their ability to see the truth. And a person who is a critical thinker is somebody who wants to know the truth and is willing to acknowledge that they may be emotionally affected and influenced, and that their beliefs may not be accurate as a result of that. So they constantly want to ask themselves, do I have an emotional attachment to this? Do I have an emotional agenda here? The way you know you have an emotional agenda is that when somebody offers some kind of assumption to you, like, I'm going to be offering assumptions to you. If you have a strong emotional reaction, it means that there's a possibility that you might not be thinking critically. It doesn't mean that you're right or wrong, or that I'm right or wrong. It just means that you're having an emotional reaction, and that in and of itself is a red flag, and you should say, hang on, I'm having a strong emotional reaction here. Let's now apply some critical thinking to this. And there are some questions for critical thinking. First question is something true and is something false? Very black and white. That's usually as far as people go, and then they're not critically thinking because there are different levels to truth. Is something true and is something false? But you can't usually say that. Is something partially true or partially false? Now you're talking about something, well, yes, that's true some of the time, but in other times that's not true. And then there's is something true? Is something true sometimes? Is something sometimes true and sometimes false? So when you're able to apply these things to your thinking without an emotional agenda, or even if you have an emotional reaction, you're not letting your emotions cloud your conclusions, then you're more likely to actually find out the truth. And this is all that I want us to do. Let's take a look at the truth here. I heard this verse recently, and it struck me in a way I've never been struck by this verse before. And I think partially it was because I was tired. And you know how sometimes when you're tired, you hear things differently? And I think part of it is, that I have a long space between when I used to be a Christian and when I am now. I'm obviously not a Christian now. And so I hear things differently when, I hear verses differently, because before I would just take it, based on how I was trained and based on my desire to hear it. And you're going to understand this on a much deeper level if you allow me to take you deep into what is really being said here. And we've got some other verses here, and you're going to apply this same understanding to these other verses, and you're going to see what I'm saying here is that what Jesus is telling you to do here is to dissociate. Jesus is telling you to not believe in your own existence. Jesus is asking you to commit psychic suicide. I know you don't see that. And you have to understand where people come from. Why did this belief system take hold? Because if this belief system was introduced, and even to this day, if you introduce it to people, who are in shamanic belief systems, who are in traditional, primitive belief systems, which, this is the way everybody used to believe until the modern world came along with this modern religion. And by the way, Christianity is a modern religion. It's a complete shift away from belief systems from before. If you take this, believe in so-and-so and you'll be saved, they go, what? What do I need to be saved from? I exist. I already exist. I don't need to believe in something in order to exist. It doesn't fit right. But let's take a look at the world at the time that these verses were being thrust upon the world. By the way, if you haven't already, please go watch my video, Did Jesus Really Exist? Because the archaeological and the historical evidence is irrefutable. There was never a man named Jesus of Nazareth. He didn't exist. One of the main reasons is that the town of Nazareth did not exist at the time that Jesus supposedly lived and died. There was no town of Nazareth. The town of Nazareth was created at least it was founded a couple hundred years after Jesus' supposed death. So it's impossible for there to have been a man called Jesus of Nazareth. And I know Christian apologists have all kinds of weird ways to, but the evidence is clear. But besides that, let's just assume, for argument's sake, that this man did exist, okay? And he says, "He who believes in me will live even though he dies." Now, I heard that and it struck me weird for the first time, like, hang on a second. What I heard in that is that if you don't believe in Jesus, he won't exist. Now, normally, when we hear this verse, we apply it to ourselves and our need to be saved. And when we hear it from the need to be saved, then it strikes us and we want it. It's a sales pitch. Let's just say it for what it is. It's a sales pitch. If you believe in me, you will have eternal life. Just believe in me. Call this number, $49.95. It's a sales pitch. I'm not saying that's right or wrong or good or bad. It is. It's a sales pitch. And going out and evangelizing is a sales pitch. You're trying to sell people on Jesus and get them to buy that product. And the way they buy that product is with their intellectual assent. They choose to believe. When you do that, you've bought the product and you get the reward, which is eternal life. So when I heard that, it felt really strange to me, like, wow, Jesus is so insecure that he needs people to believe in him so badly that he has to put eternal life next to it. Why would somebody need that? Why does a God need you to believe in them? Because listen to what is being said here. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. I want to ask you something. Are you alive? Are you self-aware? Are you aware of your own existence? Can you feel yourself? Maybe you can't, in which case you have dissociative disorder. A lot of people have that. And what I'm saying here is that this religion came into the world when the whole civilized world was in a dissociative state. Because let's take a look at what was historically going on here. At this time, when Christianity is coming into vogue, excuse me, I'm a little cold here, I got to put on my jacket. When Christianity was coming into vogue, the Roman Empire was at its height. In fact, it was about to start to disintegrate. But at this point, it was at its height. And it covered the entire known world, the entire known civilized world. I mean, there is no country as large as the Roman Empire is now. There's no country in the world now that has that much influence on civilized society. The majority of the population in the Roman Empire were conquered peoples. These were people who had been conquered, and in many cases, their religion and their culture and their language had been wiped out, or was in the process of being wiped out, or was in the process of merging. We talk about the what is that in Italy? I forget what it's called. Hopefully I'll edit this part out. In any case, you have huge cultures in there whose languages disappear in favor of the Roman language. Their belief and their religion and their culture becomes absorbed or destroyed. You also have, there had to have been millions of slaves. And so you had a lot of people who were in slavery. And so the majority of the population of people who were already in a dissociative state, because dissociative disorder, disconnecting from yourself, seeing yourself from the outside, feeling like you're watching your life from the outside, is something that happens to people when they experience trauma, sexual trauma, physical trauma. And also, this is common with people who live through wars. So like if you're a kid and you grow up in a war-torn country and you're constantly seeing death and destruction, and maybe your family was killed or destroyed, or whatever, you tend to dissociate. And so what I'm saying is that the majority of the population of the Roman Empire was in a dissociative state. When you're in a dissociative state, you don't want to connect to yourself. You want to disconnect from yourself. And here comes this guy who says, don't believe in your own existence. Believe in me, believe in my existence, and you'll be saved. I will save you. People who go through trauma tend to also demonize themselves. There's a lot of self-hatred. They tend to blame themselves. If they had done something different, this wouldn't have happened. I was abused because I deserved it. I'm a bad person. And this is what? Another underpinning of the entire Christian religion is that you are born in sin. You deserve punishment. You deserve the worst punishment in existence, which is eternal torment. That's how horrible you are. There's no Christian listening to me who doesn't know that that's what you teach. That God hates sin, therefore he hates sinners. I mean, you can say he loves you all that much, but how much did God love you? He took his son, who was perfect and sinless, and poured out all of his rage, his murderous rage, his desire to kill and destroy his own creation. He poured into his own son for you. I mean, If that was done by a living human being, that would be the sign of a megalomaniac, maniacal serial killer. We would lock that person up and we would kill them because they are so damaged and so evil. This is who you're worshiping. I'm just telling you. You know, if you were to take the same attributes that we ascribe to Jehovah and give it to a living human being, we would call that person a maniacal psychopath. Why do you think that was so attractive to the whole world? The whole Western world adopted this belief system. The Roman world. The Roman world adopted this belief system almost instantaneously. It was forced upon the pagan barbarians, with a knife to their throat. But the Roman citizens adopted it, and they chose to adopt it. That tells you that their mindset was that way, which means that they were suffering from dissociative disorder, and that they wanted to disassociate from themselves, and that they felt unconsciously a lot of self-hatred. They felt unworthy, they felt sinful and ugly and gross and deserving of destruction, which is why when out of nowhere this completely foreign religion comes in and says, hey, you're born in sin, you are sinful, this life is misery, you deserve to be thrown into hell forever, they adopted it, swallowed it, and said yes, and said, but if you just believe, you don't have to do anything else but believe in this guy and believe that this happened. That's all you have to do. You will be saved. And then you will live in eternal bliss. The big promise of Christianity right here is that you will live in bliss forever. So again, we have a population of people who are not focusing on their life now. They're focusing on how the hell can I get the hell out of this body and get to a heaven where I will be happy. Get me the hell out of here. Save me. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. This is a death cult. This is no different than the who are the guys, the guys that, the Hale Bob Comet guys that drank the Kool-Aid and killed themselves because they want out. This is why there is such a strong desire for belief in the Matrix, that we live in this, it's again, dissociative disorder. We live in a computer program, nothing is real, and I want to escape the Matrix. These are people suffering from dissociative disorder. They are psychically traumatized, either because of just living in society. Maybe they've been physically abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused. At the very least, they have been on some level emotionally abandoned, and that abandonment creates this feeling that you don't really exist. The flat earth people who are flat earth people, the same thing. The flat earthers are not scientists. Whenever you talk to a flat earther, there is always a religious belief connected to it. A lot of them are staunch Christians, and they believe in the flat earth. And it's again this desire to be lifted out, that God saves you and takes you to eternal life. The focus of the here and now is not there. They're dissociated from the here and now. But I heard this from a different place, which is Jesus is so insecure and so afraid that if he doesn't get people to believe in him, he's going to disappear. Listen to it again with that understanding. Imagine now, instead of being the person that Jesus is talking to, which is how we normally do it, imagine yourself being Jesus. And then imagine what state you would have to be in to say this to somebody. I am the resurrection and the life. He's a human being at this point. He's not like some God, that appears. He's a human being standing in front of you. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, even though he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? This is interesting. He's trying to comfort some woman who is deeply in pain because of the loss of a family member. And instead of focusing on her pain and saying, even if you take this and he says, don't worry, I'm the resurrection and the life. He believed in me. He's not going to die. It's okay. Here, I love you. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Don't worry, he's in a better place, right? He doesn't do that. He then says, don't worry, he believed in me. He's going to live. And by the way, everyone who's listening, everyone who believes in me will also live. And then he comes back to her and he says, do you believe this? He's totally taking the focus away from what he's supposed to be doing, which is comforting somebody. And he's making it about himself and then turning it on her so that she's like, has to, then this guilt of, do I believe this? Yeah, yes, Lord, I believe this. It's weird. It shows somebody who's got some real issues, who's really insecure. And that's what I heard, recently when I heard this again. I don't know, I was flipping through channels or something and it came up and I heard this and I went, what? What a weird thing to say. And what an insecure being that has to go around saying to you, if you believe in me, if you intellectually assent to me and that I am this and I am that, then you'll be, all you have to do is just believe it. Don't worry about the evidence, just believe it. Intellectually believe it. Then let me just give you some more verses to back this up. Okay, here's another verse. Then Jesus cried out, whoever believes in me does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. Imagine yourself saying that. Imagine somebody, just a normal human being, walks by who says, believe in me, because if you believe in me, then you really believe in God, which means if you don't believe in him, then you don't believe in God. Which is what? It creates guilt. It creates doubt. If you believe in him, then you believe in God. But if you don't believe in him, well, then you don't really believe in God, do you? What kind of person talks this way? This is the sign of somebody who is very deeply insecure. What he is telling you to do is to stop believing in your own existence. When I was 4 years old, one of my first memories, I don't know, it may be my first memory. I think so. I think it's my first memory, now that I think about it. I might be wrong about that. But it's definitely one of my first memories. I was 4 years old, and I remember exactly where I was. I was standing, I was a little kid. I can remember everything was, like the plants were like at eye height. I was looking at, stuff now that would be at my, my knees, and it was at my eye height, the plants. Standing in my parents' driveway right outside the front door. And I wasn't really looking at anything in particular, but I just remember because I was looking, that's where I was looking when this thought came to my mind. I became really aware of my own existence. And I could feel that I existed. I was feeling that I was life, that I was consciousness. And I remember having this thought that I was going to live forever. Now, I wasn't thinking to myself that I was going to physically live forever because I wasn't associating myself with a physical body. I was just feeling my awareness. And, my body was just sort of there. I was feeling my awareness. I was self-aware. And to me, it was an absolute fact. I mean, logically, there's no way that I could not exist. It's not possible. I wasn't using those words, obviously, but that was the feeling, is that it wasn't possible for me to not exist. And that I always would exist. I would exist forever. In fact, the feeling of it would be impossible for me not to stop existing. Now, I've since shared that with people and say, you realize that most 4-year-olds don't think like that. So, I don't know. But I did have that thought. And so when I hear this phrase now, it tells me that Jesus is talking to people who don't even believe in their own existence and who want to give up belief in themselves. Because to believe in somebody else means to stop believing in your own existence, to dissociate. He's saying, I'm the resurrection and the life. He who dissociates with their own existence and associates with me will live. Even if you're dead, don't worry. Even if you're dead, you still associate. Just even after death, I want you to associate with me and not yourself. And anybody listening to me, if you dissociate with yourself and believe in me, you'll live. Not only that, but if you believe in me, if you dissociate from yourself and associate with me, you'll become God. Because he who believes in me not only believes in me, but believes in he who sent me. So you can dissociate with yourself and associate with God. Stop believing in your own existence. Here's the crazy part. This is a verse that is given to people who do not have physical access. Let's just assume, for argument's sake, that Jesus of Nazareth actually walked the planet. He's not walking the planet now. I don't see him anywhere. I don't know any place where I can go and hear about him except from other people who talk about him or who read from a book. And again, you're assuming that what's written in that book actually happened, which, according to science and archaeology and history, it didn't. But even so, you're taking somebody else's belief for everything. Christianity on the whole wants you to take everything at face value and don't try and prove it. And the problem with that is that those who do try and prove it prove that it's wrong, that it's false. Apologists, you try and prove that the world was created in 7 days, you're not going to do it. Try and prove archaeologically that Jesus existed. You're not going to do it. We could get into the whole Old Testament. In case you don't know, according to the Old Testament, when Joshua came in and wiped out the Canaanites, and then the Israelites took over and became the Hebrews and the Jews, that's absolutely 100% false. That never happened. The Canaanites are the modern Israelis, the Jews, the Hebrews, are the descendants of the Canaanites. The Hebrew language is the Canaanite language. And so they were trying to destroy their own existence through this myth of Moses leading the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And this was a psychological suicide, that they wanted to dissociate with their pagan past and create this new identity. And my reasoning for that is that this is about nationalism, and we won't get into that. But this is now carried over into Christianity. And Christianity takes it a step deeper, and now it's a psychic. It's not a national suicide. It's a psychic suicide. Let's listen to some more. Jesus here is talking about the Holy Spirit, that after when he ascends and he's no longer here, then the Holy Spirit will come, and here's what he says. And when he comes, he will convict the world in regard to sin and righteousness and judgment. In regard to sin, because they do not believe in me. He's saying here that the sin, the greatest sin, think about this for a second. I want you to think about this. The greatest sin in the universe, according to this verse, is to not intellectually assent to the existence of Jesus. That if you choose not to believe in him, that you have committed the greatest sin. That's a worse sin than torturing somebody, killing somebody, stealing from somebody, murdering somebody, abusing a child. There is a sin worse than child abuse, and that is not intellectually believing in Jesus. Does that make sense to you? Every time that you assent to this, you are choosing to dissociate and choose to stop believing in your own existence. That's a sign of insanity. Deeply troubled person. Let's go on. And listen to this. I just got through talking about child abuse. Listen to this. Indeed, if anyone gives you even a cup of water because you bear the name of Christ, truly I tell you, he will never lose his reward. What it says here is that if you give a cup of water to somebody who doesn't believe in Jesus, who doesn't bear the name of Christ, who cares? You save somebody, you pull somebody out of a burning car, you give somebody food and water, you know, But if you do it for a Christian, if you give a Christian a cup of water, I mean, you're going to get rewarded for that big time. Why? Because it's got my name on it. He's got my name on it, which means that you're giving it to me. Therefore, I'm going to reward you. You give it to anybody else. Indeed, if anyone gives you even a cup of water because you bear the name of Christ, truly I tell you, he will never lose his reward. And then he goes on to say something. Now that I hear it, it sounds really strange. Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be thrown in the sea. Now, what is the operative phrase in there? Who believe in me. Now, we could go back and forth as to what it means by stumble. Does it mean to, force a little child to sin? Does it mean to cause harm to the child? Does it mean to have the child stop believing, ruin his faith? We could go on, who knows? But let's just assume, we'll take it at its, its best possible understanding that this is talking about doing something harmful to a child. He doesn't say whoever causes harm to any child deserves this punishment. He says whoever causes harm to the children that believe in me. Think about that. Think about if you were that person and you said that. A person who talks like that is a psychopath. They're a nutbag. And his entire message is, stop believing in yourself, believe in me, and you'll be okay. Now, the only way that somebody's going to want to hear that is if they already hate their lives. They hate their own existence. They are full of self-hatred. They want to die. This is, again, somebody who's been abused, somebody who's been traumatized. And remember, the Roman world is filled with people, generations of people who have been enslaved, who have been conquered, and who have been watching wars. They grew up watching Roman occupiers come in and kill their parents and enslave people and do that. These are extremely controlled and traumatized people. So yes, of course, they can't wait to get the hell out of this life. They don't have an identity anymore. They're now third, fourth, fifth generation of people who don't have their own identity. Perhaps they're hundreds of years separated from their original identity as people. And they're treated like second-class citizens most of the time. They might not even be citizens. They're probably slaves. They don't have an identity anymore. So they're dissociated. They're traumatized. And here comes somebody who says, hey, don't worry about it. Believe in me. You can identify with me, and then when you're dead, you'll be happy. This is an extremely destructive religion. Now, why is this such a big deal? Look at what has happened to the world. since the Western world adopted Christianity. More so, look at what happened when the so-called barbarians adopted Christianity. At this time that, I'm just giving you a full context of what was going on. At this time that these verses were being written down, the most barbaric and primitive of peoples in the world at that time, from the Roman perspective, were the people who are now running the world. Who is running the world? White people. Now, before you start telling me the blah, 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 look, I'm talking about over the past 400 or 500 years. Who has been the dominant culture? It's been Western European culture. And who are the people that have been the dominant force in Western European culture? The Germanic peoples, the Anglo-Saxons, Germans, Danes, French, Spanish. The Spanish, by the way, the Spanish people were the Spanish peninsula was occupied by migrating Germanic tribespeople who took it over. Same with Italy, the Lombards. You know, the Lombardy, that means Langobard, long beard. These were Germanic tribes that came in. They occupied Italy, Spain, France. They took over all of Europe. These are the people who went over to the New World and brought with them, you know, slaves, the genocide of the Native American people. All, by the way, all of this was done while identifying with the children of Israel. They believed they were the children of Israel coming to the land of Canaan to destroy the evil Canaanites and set up the new world. People who did this were people of Germanic descent. And what I'm here to tell you is that at the time that this was written, the people of Germanic descent were seen as the most primitive, backward. They were, and I'm not overstressing it. I've done some more research, and it was even more severe than I realized. But at this time, the Germanic tribespeople were seen in the exact same way that we see uncontacted tribes in the Amazon or in New Guinea. No different. Especially continental Germania was nothing like it is now. It was full of swamps and forest. It was impassable. Like the Roman army one of the reasons they couldn't conquer it was because they just simply couldn't get their war machine through all of the jungle there. It was just thick forest and all these people. So you had these tribal people who lived in these isolated little villages and towns. You know, they weren't even towns. You know, the historians are really clear. There weren't anything as such a thing as towns. There were just people living in, you know, wherever you could, you know, in a meadow or, you know, whatever. And so the Romans were so afraid of that forest. They were more afraid of the jungle, you know, and the swamps than they were of the actual people. But that's why Germania was never conquered. So what ends up happening is that this group of people in Northern Europe, especially the Germans, because the Germans were seen as the most primitive. They were looked upon with the most disdain of all of the Northern European barbarians. The Celts had already become civilized, and in Celtic tradition was much more civilized than the barbarian Germanic peoples. And the reason why this is important is because it means that for hundreds of years, these people were looked upon with such disdain by the rest of the civilized world. And what happens when people are conquered, even if it's economically, because that's what really happened. The conquest of Germania was an economic one. In order for them to be part of, society, they had to adopt Roman culture and society and Roman religion. That's why they did it. In order to specifically the Frankish Empire, Charlemagne, in order to be able to be associated with Charlemagne and to trade and to survive in the modern world, they had to become Roman Catholic in order to function. And their conversion to Christianity was not done internally like it was in the Roman Empire. It was forced upon them. So what ends up happening with tribal people, especially primitive tribal people, who have to discard their religion, their society, their identity, is that they overcompensate. And so here you have, just hundreds of years before, just people who were literally hundreds of years before, they were the most primitive, barbarian, tribal people in the known world at that time. Now you have them running the show. So what do? They do the same thing that the Canaanites did. The Canaanites, when they became the Israelis, when they became the Hebrews, the Jewish nation especially, they denied their own tribal existence. They wiped out their Canaanite heritage, and they rewrote their history. The Germanic people did the same thing. They rewrote their history and denied all of their connections. In fact, to this day, when you go in college and you take history, the history of Europe, whenever you hear about it, you don't hear about anything. And if there's any talk about the Germanic tribes, they're talk about it in the third person. If you're most white people in America, probably have some Germanic blood in them. I mean, I'm full-blooded. I didn't know it until a while ago, but I'm 100% Anglo-Saxon, Danish, and whatever. Those are my ancestors. And the reason why it's important is because who are the people who are the strongest proponents of fundamentalist Christianity? Not the Spanish people, they're very Catholic. Not the Polish people, right? Not even the French people. Anglo-Saxons, Germans and Anglo-Saxons. These are the people who are most staunchly fundamentalist. These are the people who most staunchly want to associate with this belief system of, you're a worthless piece of crap. Your existence is horrible. You should disassociate from yourself and believe in somebody that you can't even prove exists. And if you do that, then you'll live forever. And these are the people who are credited, and I'm agreeing with this, these are the people who are credited with slavery, with destruction of the natural environment, global warming. These are the people who went around and started colonizing the rest of the world. It's true. This is where racism, this was the birthplace of the most intense racism we've ever seen. The Nazis came out of where? Came out of Germany. Why? Because they were so, in order to be accepted into modern society, they had to adopt this idea that they are barbarian, evil, sinful, that everything having to do with what was most important to them, which was nature. There's a reason why the Germanic tribes people didn't build big cities. It's because they were nature worshipers. They lived in the forest. We idolize Native Americans now, and we romanticize them as being these people who are one with nature, and they can track the animals and they can connect. Who do you think that was in Roman times? It would have been a Germanic guy. Because when the Romans tried to go in there, they couldn't navigate all of that forest and nature. but who could? They could disappear like smoke. Were the tribal Germanic people. Tacitus paints this picture of the tribal Germanics on horseback the same way that we do about Native Americans on horseback. That they rode bareback, they were naked, they could jump off of a horse out of nowhere and fight and jump back on the horse. They could disappear in and out of the forest. They were one. Tacitus makes it very clear the Germanic people, they didn't have idols or temples, that they saw the gods in nature. They were nature worshipers. And why am I bringing that out? I'm bringing that out to then contrast it to how we see white people today. And I completely agree with it. They're the most disconnected from nature. They hate nature. They're destroying nature. They colonize. They enslave. They're dissociated from themselves. They hate themselves. And they project that onto everything around them. So these are some of my thoughts here about this. It just struck me. So the whole point of this is, I've talked about Christianity and I've talked about the Germanic peoples and all that. If none of that means anything to you, that's fine. What I would like for you to do, though, is to ask yourself how you feel about it. Do you feel disassociated with yourself? Because original religion all over the world was about belief in yourself. The exact opposite of this belief system. So, anyway, I'm not sure I said what I wanted to say, but maybe it hit a chord with you, but we'll leave it at that. All right, so by the way, I just found out that if you go to the live Q&As, which are now on Facebook until the end of March. Oh, by the way, please subscribe and click on the bell button so that you'll be notified every time that I have a video comes up. Also, go to this link here so that you can enjoy the live question and answer videos. If you want to learn about all my books and my DVDs, you want to find out all the courses that I teach, then go to courses.thunderwizard.com. If you think that I should stay on this channel, and if you think I should be telling the truth, if you think that I should stand up to these billionaire gurus who are trying to silence me from telling the truth, then I want you to go here, thunderwizard.com, and subscribe.